If you've heard of Shaedon Sharpe, you probably know he's one of the most gifted athletes the sport has ever seen. Last summer, his high school coach claimed he performed a 49-inch vertical leap. These things are prone to exaggeration, but if he repeats this feat at the draft combine, it would break the NBA record. There's way more to basketball, obviously, but there has been a study that concluded impressive feats of athleticism at the combine have historically impacted a player's draft positioning. And if Sharpe does break the record, it's pretty easy to see a front office finding this too tantalising to turn down. He certainly showcased this vertical leap for Team Uplay, and in doing so revealed a certain flaw of being able to at the very least be a play finisher, pressuring the rim as a cutter and lob threat. And trying to finish at the rim yourself if Sharpe is nearby is often an exercise in futility. So we have a 6'6" guard with explosive athleticism who put up numbers in AAU with good shooting efficiency. That seems like a pretty good recipe for a top pick. However, if you've been paying attention to the coverage of Sharpe's game over the last few weeks, you'll know there are big question marks about his first step and that burst perimeter scorers need to get downhill. When he's attacking off a catch, Sharpe is quick. He takes long strides and floats to the rim. Swing the ball to him against a rotating defense and it's an easy blow-by. In the half court, he can absolutely get by his defender with sudden acceleration, leaving his man behind him. He has a hesitation move where he can stop in midair, then explode downhill. Not only is this really fast, driving, pulling back out and then accelerating again, this is his offhand he's using and the weaker leg he's pushing off. Some skill trainers will prefer keeping the feet more grounded, but clearly Sharpe likes pushing off this way out of a hesitation and does have success with it. He uses his footwork to throw off the defender. Watch how he kind of skips forward here, and it looks like this is his normal rhythm as he advances. He floats the ball right to left, then left to right again, and hangs the ball in midair for a split second, looking as if he's about to transfer left again, except this time he attacks instead and the defender doesn't see it coming. Little disguises like this can be just as crucial as your first step. I do however think that the float he has with the ball for the hesitation can make him a little predictable, and at times inefficient. This time a defender anticipates this, which many will throughout the game after repeated matchups. He could hit him with a crossover at this point, but if he wants to drive this way, he could try to pierce through the gap more often with his shoulder still down rather than coming up first in this motion. It's the movement here that's inefficient. If we look at a driver like James Harden, you can see there's minimal to no lift at all on his upper body. He keeps his shoulders stacked in line with his knees, not too far forwards that he's off balance, but in a 45-degree angle, which is firstly more aerodynamic, but also hard for the defender to read, because he looks the same way when he's dribbling, pounding the ball with crossovers, and then when he finally attacks. Bringing your body up in the way that Sharpe does can signal you're about to drive. One thing I do like about his driving is the use of the offhand, which he gets in between his own body and the defenders without fouling, and if we play back the last clip we can see he uses this consistently well. I think the issue that evaluators rightly point out about Shaedon's lack of a north-south game is more to do with tendency than inability. In this play the defender is backed up somewhat to try to avoid a blow-by, and there's help at the nail waiting. Sharpe takes this as a cue to pull up, which is fine, but the problem is he always takes this as a cue to pull up. These are centres switched onto him and you'd love to see him just try to drive. If help comes, he can try a push-ahead dribble to get past, or he could just kick out to the open man. Driving and generating open looks for teammates is a good thing. Take it as a compliment that you attract so much attention and use it to your team's benefit. There are plays where I don't think for a second Sharpe is even thinking about driving. He is telegraphing his move and looking to get into the sidestep or step back, at times keeping his eyes locked on the rim the entire time. Anyone who has watched the NBA over the last decade knows the importance of a three-point shot, and especially self-created three-point shots. But the real value of this has always been to open up driving lanes and to keep your defender guessing. Hit a couple of pull-ups and now the defender who was giving you space has to come up a bit tighter, allowing you to try to drive on him. I'm not so sure Sharpe keeps these mental calculations in his head, and instead he was just too in love with a pull-up every time. The thing is though, Shaedon's footwork on these side steps and step backs is phenomenal. Most guards coming through the draft these days have this in their arsenal. However, Sharpe's is the best I've seen, and being able to get this separation when the defender is hounding you is hugely important in the modern game. Sharpe shot 12 of 22 on pull-up 2-point shots, but only 30% on pull-up 3s, which isn't surprising when they come with this degree of difficulty. If he can hit the step back at a rate of just 34 or 35%, he will be an incredibly dangerous shooter, but it has to come as part of a varied diet. Driving needs to be plan A, and in the NBA when he'll be off ball, we'll see a lot more catch and shoot shots as well. It's small sample size theatre on all this stuff, and that's why I'm also not so worried about the fact he shot just 32% on catch and shoot threes during the Peach Jam campaign. The majority of these were pretty well guarded, catch and shoot doesn't automatically mean wide open, and he went 9 of 28. If he goes 11 of 28, he's at 39%, and if 2 shots are the difference between poor and good, you shouldn't really conclude anything from that data sample. Just looking at his form, I think it's really good. He rises very strongly, finds his balance when turning or coming off screens, and has a perfect release point. I think this will be absolutely fine in the NBA, and I have no issues projecting him as a very strong shooter. We do need to return to the driving game, because this is the biggest area of improvement we need to see, and Sharpe, like most young guards in fairness, was very sloppy at times. You see how he gets into trouble with these moves. I mentioned earlier the inefficient movement he had, bringing the torso up and floating the ball out wide, and this causes him issues transferring the ball from one hand to another. And similarly, when he tries to turn, he leaves the ball behind him floating far too far outwards, easy pickings for a defender. Sharpe was at his worst in transition as a ball handler. When he was bringing the ball up, he turned it over 31% of the time. He was very wasteful, clearly struggling with his handle when going at speed and in tight spaces, not protecting the ball and leaving himself completely exposed for steal attempts. He did have some impressive plays in open court, however, whether as the ball handler, leaking out, or just bringing up the ball in early offense. And it's here you can put your imagination to use, looking ahead at how the game may open up for him in a more spaced out NBA offense. One of his favourite moves was the behind the back dribble, which even when he pulled it off can look impressive but isn't getting him downhill. It's hard to keep forward momentum when doing this, and instead was just another way of getting into the pull-up. And then there's the times he wasn't able to pull it off, and the film speaks for itself here. He was 18 in an environment where he can experiment and work on his game, but at times he used this move pretty egregiously with an outrageous attempt to split the defenders here. But by the end of the campaign he did start putting this all together, using it to get away from traffic and downhill. And the fluidity of this move is just absolutely ridiculous, and if he can get this down reliably, it will be a staple of many of his highlight reels. What we need to see is more aggression getting into the paint, and Sharpe likes to attack baseline, and it's nice to have a go-to mid-range shot, but angles like these, often into traffic, just seem like recipes for pull-ups. Even in handoff situations, he rarely just attacks off a catch, instead resetting and allowing his man to get in position in front. I don't think his first step is elite, but it's still very good, and should be utilised more often. Just once I wanted to see him get the ball and just go, no hesitation, just attack, but he never did. And this lack of north-south play I keep referring to will be a serious problem unless he changes his game. For context, his 3-point rate was 39%, so the majority of his shots were inside the arc, And if we look at his shot chart, which I found on mavsdraft.com, who is a great follow on Twitter for draft stuff, he was pretty dominant in the paint when he got there. But what is perhaps more concerning is the fairly low 21% free throw rate, and without more aggressive driving, he won't get to the line, which is often what separates an 18-point per game scorer in the NBA and a 25-point per game scorer. We've mostly seen isolation clips so far, and Sharpe did run some pick and roll. Against a high screen defender, he was usually throwing up more pull-up long twos, although in fairness the spacing is pretty cramped and he's often facing two defenders at the free throw line. He did have some nice moves getting downhill though, and I think you can see here it's more about the length of his strides, his second and third steps, rather than a super quick first step which is getting him to the basket. An area of his game we haven't touched on yet is his passing, and Sharpe did a really good job against blitzers, immediately recognising the coverage and getting rid of the ball with accurate passes, which even if it's just to the closest player, allowed his team to briefly play 4-on-3. This was one of his best plays, reading how early the defender was going over the screen, rejecting it with pace, and then hitting the cutter. I'm not projecting Sharpe to be any sort of great pick and roll playmaker, he still scores first and is going to miss open shooters like here, and this would be a very tight pass to the roller, but I don't expect him to be comfortable trying that pass. He does just about squeeze a pocket pass in here, but overall he didn't show much of a two-man game with the centre out of pick and roll. The passing deserves more attention because I think it's an underrated part of his game, particularly how calm under pressure he is. He can take a step back from a trap and hit the popping shooter, and against doubles he can use his height and jumping ability to get the ball out immediately. These aren't incredibly impressive passes on the face of it, but I do think for a young player who isn't a natural on-ball playmaker, facing sudden traps and doubles and being miscomposed is actually pretty remarkable, and I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't see him panic or throw the ball away once in these situations. This is a wonderfully inventive pass between the defender's legs, so good it deserves repeat viewing. As does this audacious attempt, which doesn't quite connect, but in my book he gets points for getting it so close. There should also be encouragement from some signs of a driving kick game. This is a fantastic behind the back shovel pass to the corner. And excuse the pun, some of these passes could be a little sharper whether it's the read or the actual pass. But again here we see the value in his height, being able to pass over the top. He's able to add a little strength to his pass with both his right and left hand, which will be useful if he can become a deep penetrating diving kick player hopefully one day in the future. Kind of randomly in one game he was asked to flash middle in order to defeat a zone, and he immediately took the challenge and had some really nice passes. He might never be asked to do this in his entire NBA career, but quick decision making and accurate passing is a translatable skill which will serve him well in many situations going forward. He was very capable throwing pinpoint, long, kick-ahead passes in transition, showing some signs of a deep passing range. Although most were pretty simple, nothing to exactly scream from the rooftops about, but again just showing he's not going to hold onto the ball too much and will move it on to a teammate with an advantage. Defensively, I have to say Sharpe was pretty awful on the perimeter. He gave up lots of blow-bys and there's barely any effort to contain. And I don't really know what he's doing with his arms. It's like he's intentionally opening up the lane for the driver. This is just a lack of effort, which is what you get in AAU basketball as a scoring guard. I'd be incredibly impressed if he was locked in on defense at this level. Instead, I'm trying to put this into the context of a competition. When Sharpe does engage, he shows some ability to stop a ball handler. He's bouncy and goes left-right quite fluidly, and you start to see how useful those arms can be with the 7-foot wingspan. There is such a thing as being too bouncy, however, and he's easily rocked one way with a dribble move. He overcommits, and a more stable stance with more subtle footwork will serve him better. This last one is mostly just slow processing speed. It's as if there's a lag playing on an online matchup, and this is something he can suffer from. He's frozen and isn't computing fast enough. Sharpe likes to gamble when he's defending, which is a tendency I hate. I don't care if you get a steal or two a game, and people on Twitter think you're a good defender because of it. Poking the ball here is so rare, and giving up for blow-by is what happens 9 times out of 10. I do like him showing his hands, and this can be a good weapon to deter the driver on an island. But again, you don't want to overcommit, and here he expects a crossover, so shifts his weight onto his left hand, and instead it's an in and out dribble and he's gone the wrong way. Now, off-ball taking gambles can be really worthwhile on these side-to-side passes on the perimeter, which over a course of a season point guards tend to get lazy with. They often bring show-stopping dunk opportunities and are instant defense into offense. When it comes to screen defense, Sharpe has poor technique. If we go slow motion here, you can see there's no attempts to pressure the ball or force angles, which in fairness in this clip is a little harder because the ball handler is coming downhill fast in early offense. But his stance is really arched over. He's trying to put emphasis on getting that foot out ahead to go over, but this is an illegal screen. The screener's legs are far too far out, so that's not Sharpe's fault. But I'd like to see that chest out more so he's ready to bump the ball handler and make him feel some contact. At least in this play, he's using his arms to make contact and gets around the screen with the right elbow, but the ball handler here is pretty slow and isn't driving aggressively. If he was, I think he blows right by him before Sharpe can get around. A side screening action here, and again we see no attempt to get out to the ball, and instead he just lazily walks into the screen, not showing any fight or effort to contest. We see his difficulties processing from earlier reappear on this play, where he's way too early trying to go over the screen, gifting the ball handler the crossover. It's an awful angle to start with. He's allowing the screen rejection for the guard to go right way too easy, and if he was trying to ice it on purpose, he's still not in the correct position. However, I will give him the benefit of the doubt because this was a quick screening action, and he may not have even known a screen was coming. This is more like it, and you can see how he straightens up from his defensive stance, takes a wide step over the screen, and uses his chest to at least make the guard uncomfortable. As he adds strength, which he currently lacks, contact like this will be far more effective. The lack of strength was quite evident watching the film. Here he tries to set a screen and gets pushed all the way back into the shooter. This did affect his defense. He does well to meet the driver here and he's fast getting into position, but that's too easy for the turnaround J. As Sharpe adds muscle, he'll be much better at forcing shooters away from their spots. Early on in his career, just getting there first will be key. Adding muscle will come over time if it hasn't already started. A less charitable observer may again point out here that this is not just the strength that is lacking, it's the overall lack of aggression in his game. A physical tool Sharpe is blessed with is incredible wingspan. Whether he's closing out to a shooter or acting as a primary defender, he's able to put up really strong contests. He will learn to use this as his advantage, conceding a step of space on the perimeter if he has to help avoid blow-bys, knowing that with his jumping ability and long wingspan, he'll be able to contest for pull-ups anyway, enjoying the best of both worlds. This is the tools that NBA teams will be betting on, that with work in the gym he can get the fundamentals down, but you really can't teach 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan, and his body has almost everything needed to be a difference-making defender. Adding strength to his frame will be the final missing piece. His leap is so ridiculous, he ends up fouling the shooter on this jump, going from here to here all in one leap. He'll actually have to make an adjustment to make sure he doesn't close too much space in foul plays like this. The lesson to learn is holding your position, and when he performs hard closeouts, he's easily turned around and beaten, left in the dust frequently. I could honestly say this about 99% of young players I've ever seen. It's the most common mistake we make, so I'm not too worried about it, but at all aspects of his defence, discipline and engagement is something he needs to dedicate himself to. Off ball, you can see how valuable Sharpe's physical tools can be as he jumps passing lanes or comes in from the weak side to help protect a rim. This is probably aided by the fact he was at times the tallest player on the court, but he'll always have that vertical leap to help collapse into the paint. And if a pass is coming across him, he's pretty quick off the mark to get deflections and steals. Predictably though, Sharpe is also prone to falling asleep off ball, and he allows his man to cut ahead of him when the shot goes up to get in position for a rebound. He ball watches and is waiting for the pass to leak out, lacking any sort of awareness of what's happening around him. He's also just lazy at times, even this closeout which he ends up contesting pretty well. It's kind of slow and you can tell he's relying on his athleticism rather than actually trying all that hard. Which again, for important context, I bet a lot of star NBA players also did the same in AAU. Still though, it is alarming seeing a lack of interest and competitiveness to even try to get involved on some of these plays. If the ball is near him, he'll half-heartedly throw an arm in to help, but that's about as much effort as he'll extend to. Don't expect to see any rotation afterwards or closing out to his man who's relocated. When he's the low man, he sometimes gets stuck guarding space, not doing anything to help on the drive, even though that's what his positioning demands he does. Which is a shame because when he is in position to contest, he does a pretty good job. That being said, early in the campaign, Sharpe was at times used as a centre defensively, as he was sometimes the biggest or second biggest defender, and he was badly exposed. He wouldn't be expected to play this role in the NBA anyway, but his lack of positional awareness meant he wasn't given much run in this position. To wrap up, I'm going to go with some quick hits, just briefly covering some areas of his game that I haven't discussed yet. The first is relocation, which is super important for a shooting guard, and something Jalen Green was very strong at going into last year's draft as the best SG. Take this with a dose of salt, because I can't say I paid particularly strong attention to this throughout watching all his games, but I was a bit disappointed at times with his perimeter relocation, either through a lack of effort in letting the passing lane to him be blocked, or through what seems to be poor instincts in knowing where he should be for the driving kick. This is vital for off-guard play and something he needs to work on. He was, however, very good as a cutter, using a backdoor cut when overplayed and sneaking into space in the paint as the defence is occupied with the driving action of a ball handler. So he does have some movement instinct and effort. It was more of a perimeter relocation I thought could be better. But his speed and above the rim athleticism make him a clear threat as a cutter. Again, this will hopefully be something we see more of in the NBA, with more space to cut into, and with the league's recent obsession with 5-out offense, he could be quite a valuable outlet, opening up an offense by cutting to the rim. Next is the rebounding, and you'll have seen from some of the transition clips earlier how he's often a player rising up and collecting the ball to start the fast break. With his vertical leap, he's able to help on the offensive glass too, at times showing some physicality and instincts to get in front of his man. A lot of NBA teams play small, at least for some parts of the game, so having rebounding wings is really important, and it'll be very helpful if you're getting this at the shooting guard position. To conclude, I'm just playing some clips of Sharpe driving and finishing at the rim, mostly in open court. Yes, there are some questions about how good his first step is, and there's some issues finishing through contact, which all young guards have, but he did shoot 68% in the paint for his campaign. He has a great second and third step and can glide to the rim, and has shown he can be slithery and weave through bodies. Combine that with what I think most would agree is a very strong looking outside shot, with advanced self-creation moves, and there's no doubt Shaedon is a very worthy top 5 pick this year. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he moves higher by draft night, and if he does, what this will tell us is he just killed it in workouts, showing front officers the improvement on his driving game and tantalising teams with the prospect of being a premier 3-level scorer in the NBA one day. Now put that all together with his athleticism and frame, and Sharpe could join the ranks of Jalen Green and Anthony Edwards as young stars who are bringing back the pure shooting guard position.